Uh, you cannot see my PowerPoint.
Wait. We need to find something. Just a moment.
Okay, wait. How about now?
Let's wait. Yes. Now can.
I don't know what happened.
Thank
Anyway, what I was saying that I took this slide from pewresearch.org. They did a survey which countries are afraid from, a Russian military threat from, now on after what happened in Ukraine. And as we see that number one is Poland. And of course, because Poland is a close neighbor, not a close neighbor, it's a neighbor with, Ukraine. And plus also it's, Eastern European country. It was part of, Soviet bloc during, the communist era. And that's why they are afraid that something may happen. Of course, we have major countries like UK, France, Spain, Italy, Germany, even United States and Canada, that they believe that, they start, worrying what's going to happen next. Now here, this is the timeline between Ukraine and Russian relations. And I took from Ukraine Institute. Of course, it starts from Ukraine independence in January 26, 1918, and starts the major, key points with the collapse of Soviet Union. And we have also, again, Ukraine independence from the Soviet Union. And of course, the events that took place in 2014, that they were, let's say, the harbinger for the events that took place now, before, the invasion. And I want to mention this is just a point of reference about Ukraine, because University of Warsaw, a Ukrainian lady, mentioned that Ukraine existed before, 1918. And of course, this is just a point of reference, as everybody knows that Ukraine, as any other European country, exists since the beginning of time. So, but this is just a point of reference to see what exactly happened between Russia and Ukraine, and as part also Russia of Soviet Union. Now, about the events till recent information that we have till March 17, the Statista shows the number of civilian and casualties in Ukraine during the Russian invasion, how many killed and how many injured. This is just a point of reference. The number of civilian deaths related to Russian and Ukraine conflict. And here they have nice graph that they compare what happened in 2014 and now 2021 up to the point of, up to, April 14. Now the total number of sanctions imposed by Australia, Canada, and European Union, because of course it was, expected that most of the countries we will post sanctions and about what's going on, in Ukraine, because we have to mention no one around the globe, any country doesn't have the right to invade and in that way to another country, and the country loses dependence for any kind of reason. Even any country has esoteric problems, they need to find an alternative way to solve them. But of course, we need to find why Russia decided to behave the way it behaved. This is the market price, of course, of Russian companies around the world in exchange, exchange. That as we see that the prices went down dramatically. The same happens also in the London Stock Exchange. As you see, these are the main companies that are administered not only within Russia but market, but internationally. And this is the potential loss of GDP during due to the potential Western sanctions for Russia. And as we see that the main income stream from the Russian economy is the natural gas, which natural gas has the monopoly and for the European Union, because European Union is the main market player for Russia, and vice versa. Whereas all the other, as we see, the other industries are, let's say, are not so, the impact is not so big, which means that even if you have this kind of sanctions, the Russian economy will not hit so hard as we expect it to be. Now, this is the estimated long-term change in annual gross domestic product due to the trade restrictions of the United States and its allies. And as we see, what will be the change compared also to the other countries, because it's not, it will not only affect the Russian economy, but also the countries that they have, trade with Russia. And as we see, in the first place, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 5, Eastern, ex-Eastern, European countries. Now, we see in this map the countries that they condemned the invasion. It's nice to see that, of course, we have the countries, that belong to NATO, those who are opposed to Russia, and those who are aligned to Russia, and those who, let's say, remain neutral. But as we see in this next slide, the next, map, we see exactly who is who supports Russia and who supports, NATO. And it's really interesting to see that the Arab world, despite the fact that the first slide shows that they keep some kind of neutrality, in fact, somehow they support Russia. I'm not saying that all these countries support invasion, but they support, Russia for this moment. Now, these are the Putin's conditions for ending the war. As we see that President Putin asked Ukraine to step down and from any kind of NATO, let's say, dreams about the future. And this is probably the #1 thing that Russia wants. Of course, Crimea is recognized as territory of Russia, and they expect this to officially be, recognized, something that I don't think we need to express any point of view, especially for issues that have to do with Ukraine and Russia, because this is, between those two countries, and whatever any opinion we may express, I don't think it is fair, because this is part of Ukraine and let's say Russian business. It's not, for us to tell what they have to do. This is between them, two of them. The third is now the independence of granting to people of republics of Donetsk and Lugansk. Again, this is another crucial issue. The demilitarization of Ukraine. Also, Ukraine goes through a process of denazification, which I don't know exactly what Russia wants from Ukraine in that, in this sense. And the last one is the Russian language to become official language, something which perhaps, can take place, because as in any country, when there is a minority, usually, the language of that minority is become, official language of the country. I give you an example, Malaysia, that, it's not only Malays, but also Chinese and Indians, are part, of languages, of Malaysia. And now we need to see an interesting graph about the foreign policy, about Kremlin's action, how Russia saw the events that took place after the collapse of Soviet Union with the United States, and see, you know, with their own lens what, you know, they felt. And as we see that whatever United States or Europe did, or NATO did, you know, the last 30 years, they feel, you know, that they are threatened. They threaten their independence. They threaten, you know, the country itself. And all of these major events, I just circled only 3 of them in order to pay attention. The first one is in 2000 that it says Russia must fight to exist. This is exactly what President Putin mentioned 4 or 5 days ago, when he said that Russia had to invade Ukraine because it's a matter of existence. And this is something that we see that Russia mentioned or saw that coming since 2000. The second one is to 2006, where most of Russia's Western debt paid off. Why this is important? Because as you see, there is a diversification. There is a not diversification, diversion of Russia policy compared, you know, to NATO or compared, you know, to West, and they try to follow their own path, meaning that since they got independence, economic independence, they realize that they have now the ability to set their own, you know, policy, and domestic and regional and foreign policy. And the last part is in 2016, where it says that the West is in decline. This is important because this shows that Russia, from that moment, decided that, okay, it's time to implement our plan, and because this is the right moment. Now we can wait, you know, for so long, all these years. We were weak, and now we can turn the table and, you know, the game in favor of us. Now we need now to see what are the real reasons behind Ukraine's invasion. The first one is that NATO missiles will take less than 30 minutes to hit Moscow. NATO, as we see, that they want to put some missiles in Eastern European countries. And with the plan, Ukraine or perhaps Belarus to become members of NATO. Probably you may say, why then, you know, Russia behaved the way it behaved? Then I have to mention to you what happened in 1962 with Cuban Missile Crisis, when Soviet Union wanted to set some, you know, missiles in Cuba, and how United States behaved, and this was an action of war. Based on that logic and based on the way the United States behaved, you know, at that time, this is exactly the opposite way. This is now have the Russia to do what they do, meaning Russia wanted and mentioned many times that doesn't want the presence of NATO next to their borders. And they mentioned many times in the past, but no one listened. A nice, interesting comment was from Ukrainian lady here in West Virginia, an instructor, and said, but why Russia has to invade Ukraine, where Alaska, the American soil, is only 6 nautical miles from Russian borders? And I answered to her that because it says it doesn't make sense. I said it makes perfectly sense, because if missiles, NATO missiles set to Ukraine, Belarus, or any other of the countries that are near to Russia, it's only 30 minutes to hit Moscow, where from Alaska, it probably takes 3 or 4 hours to hit Moscow. Plus, Russia has the Urals mountains that they are not this physical, let's say, protection, but probably their, missile defense is there. So they are well prepared, for this event. That's why they don't want, there's no such kind of, let's say, protection from Russia or Moscow if missiles will, would set by, in Ukrainian soil or any other, country that is near to Russian borders. The second reason, which is really interesting, I found this interesting graph from New York Times. I had some suspicions that China wants to expand, and China wants to, wants Siberia, but I never expect that this will be probably other, people will, especially, here in the United States, that will foresee this kind, of thing, because it's not easy to see that China is ready to make a big move unless if you live, in Asia. As you see, China, if we say that China needs to expand because China has the natural resources, it has a population, and also has the military capability to do something like that. But the problem is that from the east, it's Japan. And as you mentioned, Dr. Mario, in one of your papers, that everybody knows that Japanese and Chinese, they want to rule Asia. And that's why it's something that China cannot let it happen. And that's why perhaps a war between China and Japan is inevitable. From the other side, as we see that China, from a paper that I did about Kashmir 5 years ago, and I see the conflict of Kashmir where Pakistan, India, and China are in conflict about Kashmir, where Kashmir doesn't have any, let's say, natural resources, or it is important, but Kashmir is the gate to West for China, but something that China cannot do because it's between Pakistan and India. And what China did is they follow the doctrine, the enemy of my friend is the enemy of the enemy is my friend, which means that decided to support Pakistan in the conflict between India, because they know that the major player here is India. The same strategy that China applies now with Russia, because what happened now in Russia and Ukraine is not exactly Russians, let's say, decision, but it's supported by China. And as we see that from north, that China, the only place that probably they wish to, to expand is Siberia. Siberia is one of the few places in the world that have natural resources. It's one of the reasons that if you understand what's going on in terms of natural resources, you realize and translate the Russian policy from the collapse of Soviet Union till now. Why? Because Russians realized after the collapse of Soviet Union that even if you cannot keep, the countries, the post-Soviet countries that probably they share some, cultural, similarities, or countries that are, next to you, and they cannot be with you. Plus, the loss of the defeat of the Russian army in Afghanistan, they realize that, it's not worth it. There's no point to play a leading role, in the planet. Why? Because Russia has the natural resources. There are 3-4 places in the world that have natural resources. One of that is Siberia, that is part of Russia. The other one is Canada. United States have natural resources. And in the end, the natural resources has Latin America with Brazil and Argentina. And of course, New Zealand. And very few natural resources in Europe are the Nordic countries, like Finland, Norway, Sweden. So the plan of Russia is to be able to maintain their land, because they know that we now moving in an era of scarcity of natural resources. What does it mean? It means that it's a matter of time to have conflicts all over the globe for the natural resources. And what Russia needs and wants is to have these ex-European countries or the Soviet states with their side, because they need these countries as a buffer zone, meaning that they want to secure their borders in order to keep their natural resources. Russia doesn't need to play a leading role. They just need to be independent and be able to survive. The next slide, let's see. And now is another reason, the third reason, the natural resources in the Arctic Circle. And as you see in the Arctic Circle, there are economic reasons like shipping lanes and natural resources, political, diplomatic reasons, and military. And as we see in the Arctic Ocean, the main players are Canada, Denmark, Finland, Iceland, Norway, Russia, Sweden, and United States. Russia, as you see, has probably 50% of that area, where the United States with Alaska, it's just has a small part, on this game. And of course, Denmark is a major player with Greenland. Now we understand why Russians are engaged and threaten Finland, Sweden, or perhaps Norway to become part of NATO, because also economic reasons are involved. It's not only that the missiles, will be next to the Russian borders, but also they have also economic reasons, because if we give the reason, entitled reason to Russia to invade, to Finland, Sweden, or Norway, that's what they want. Because then they will have the majority of the area in the Arctic Ocean. Now, these are the recent activities that took place between Chinese and Russians, and as we see that they try to find ways to exploration of natural resources, to pass, the gas pipe from the Arctic regions. The Chinese also, they want to build a port in Iceland, and mainly Chinese and Russians, are right now they focus on the Arctic Sea, and as we see in the end that Canadians have some concerns because no one else, participate in this game. It seems that these two players now are on. Now I took this quote from Chris Higgins in the USA that there is competition over resources. The competition, however, is not just to win, but to define the rules, the players, the extent of the playing field. But this quote says everything, meaning that we have a game changing, and this game will change based on natural resources. And who has the natural resources will control politically and economically the planet. So resources and conflict is because of scarcity. So we have an environmental scarcity leads to political and social pressures. The elite capture the resources which is in common, and they will see who's benefit of this, narrative of crisis. And this is one of the graphs that shows how these tensions escalate when start pop up. And as we see that we have different levels, and this will lead to historical land claims, and one of the last one, over centralized governance systems. Now you can understand why we move to a globalization, because globalization has to do with natural resources. Now we talk about natural resources, and I put in terms of graph and the way it is in globally about the first water. The waters resources worldwide, and as we see, water, the places that are there are still water resources, freshwater renewable resources are in Canada, Russia, as we see, Brazil, and Latin America mainly, and of course certain parts, of Europe and in Africa. And as we see that there is a significant problem in most of the Africa, Middle East, and Asia. Now, in terms of organic agriculture, and as we see, who are the best main players there? Argentina, United States, France, a bit, Germany, small amount, China, India, and of course, Australia. Now, in terms of world agriculture, we see again, in terms of, of a map, who are, the major players, more or less are the same, but we see also small players in the market. And here now, this is again a world map in terms of natural resources, precious, metals, which are important for production and production, high-tech production. And as we see, China has the main precious metals that are really important for this kind of technology production. There is also, I think, there are certain other parts of the world, but not with just only a few metals, as we see. And now why I present all these natural resources in terms of world map? Because in order to see the pattern that BRICS follow. BRICS, as we know, is the new coalition, a new power in the planet that BRICS stands from the initials BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. And it seems that other countries are planning to enter, like Argentina and Australia, but I don't think Australia will think to join anymore after the new coalition between United States, UK, and Australia. And we see that those countries, the population of those countries constitute more or less 40% of the world population. And if we have a couple of countries to join this coalition, which seems feasible in the future, probably we have more 50 or even more than 50% of the world population under this, new development, this new union. Now, in terms of gold, those countries are the largest gold reserves worldwide, and as we see, the BRICS are in top 6, Russia and followed by China. However, Russia, even if it has one of the main gold reserves, inside the Russia borders are only 21.7% of the current gold reserves, where all the rest are diversified, sent to other countries, and one of them is China, which constitutes 13.8%, the highest among the other countries, which means that whatever China has now is really crucial, because this will determine China assistance to Russia, whether this war continue or not. We know from the sanctions that Russia doesn't have the ability to withdraw the gold from France, Japan, or Germany, or even United States, but we don't know what will be the intentions of China till now. Now we see the two different philosophies. One is the one that we see the New World Order, meaning that something new happens in the Western world that leads to globalization. And then we have the hegemony of the United States and Europe, and this leads to a borderless world. Now, why? Because when you have a scarcity of natural resources, it means that you have to follow two paths. Either you will move to globalization, which means a borderless world, which means that this gives, the right for, let's say, one government or a global government to be able to take, advantage of any place in the world of the natural resources. And since there's no independence or sovereignty of, state independence and state sovereignty, it means that, for instance, I give you an example. Let's assume that we have a global government and there is a plenty of natural resources, let's say water in Malaysia, and they need water from another side of the world. And they come and try to take the water of Malaysia in order to support other part of the world. And the Malaysians will say, yeah, but how are we going to survive? And then they will try to fight back. Yeah, but there's no government to fight back. And these, they can easily be considered as terrorists. And then the global government will send the global army in order to suppress, Malaysians, because Malaysians are not state anymore. So, in fact, their land is not their land anymore. Which means when you have a borderless world, you have a global government, and at the same time, instead of you have the state, you have private sector, you have the companies. So the companies get power, and they have the power to move around and, take advantage of those natural resources. And of course, if you have this globalized system, you need a digital, economy. You need something new, one currency, one economy and one currency that you'll be able to unify, all economic systems and financial systems worldwide, which is what we have up to now. And of course, we did digital currency. Now, we have the alternative world order, because they come, Russia and China say, yeah, but this does not work for us. Plus, I want to mention something that Chinese used to say, that there are three versions of ourselves. What we think, who we think we are, what the other people think about us, and who we really are. If we leave the last one, which is, has some kind of philosophical meaning, let's see what the other people think about us. Because we think, okay, under the globalized system, that the West, which is, what is, West? North America, Europe, and Oceania, Australia, and New Zealand, which constitute only barely 25% of the world population. And we want to set up a globalized system in order to take advantage of the natural resource, because everybody knows a common, secret, that Europe doesn't have any natural resources anymore. The only natural resources are probably in Southern European countries in terms of agriculture, and other natural resources that have, the Nordic countries. The continental Europe doesn't have natural resources. So to apply a globalized system in order to take advantage of the natural resources of the rest of the world. And now China comes and Russia say, guys, you cannot do that, because we are the majority. So now usually when you have scarcity of natural resources, you move back, from at the globalized, system, usually to regionalism. But here seems that Russia and China move one step further. They realize that even if we move to regional, setting, probably it's not enough, because they may have natural resources, but it doesn't mean that the rest of the countries, especially in Asia, have natural resources. So they try to take advantage and be able to diversify by joining other countries inside the system. That's why they decided to join, Brazil and South Africa. And the new system is based on inter-regional and regional kind coalition, meaning that they want to support the system that all of them, they have the same, let's say, partnership, something like the European Union. But I don't believe that they want to form a European Union model. They just want to exchange natural resources among themselves in order to be able to sustain the welfare of their, population. That's the whole idea. And of course, it will be a game changer if Argentina, for sure, Australia will not join this, coalition anymore. But if Argentina enter this, the BRICS model, this will be a game changer, and it will be very difficult for North America and Europe after that. because they will be totally dependent. BRICS will be totally independent. And as we see that now we have the euro and US dollar that dominated, the global markets. But if this happens, I will not be surprised if we have yuan and ruble to replace euro and dollar. Especially if Arab countries, Gulf countries, decides to enter BRICS. Now, trade suffocation. Now we're going to the model that we wrote, the economic model that we wrote with Dr. Mario, and he mentioned trade suffocation, which trade suffocation is a new term and says exactly that when a country gets a full or partial trade and investment mobility restrictions to trading and investment with the rest of the world, using a main reason of the war. And these arguments can be called suffocation, is invasion of sovereignty, abuse of power, the use of violence, and human and material damages. And this trade suffocation has an impact on economic performance, and it's a totally different of trade openness. And this is something happened suddenly. What's exactly happened in Russia? Because after invasion of Russia to Ukraine, we have trade suffocation for the Russian economy because of European and American sanctions. But at the same time, we have also trade suffocation for the Ukraine because all the economic activities have stopped dramatically because of the invasion. Now, another topic is investment disgrowth, which an investment disgrowth is again a new term. It's based on the concept of economic disgrowth that again Dr. Estrada developed in 2011, which corresponds to exports and FDI losses under the calculation of trade and investment disgrowth from the war. Economic disgrowth is something similar when you have the economic expansion, but in terms of an economic growth in terms of economic expansion. But when we have economic contraction, there's no any kind of term in order to define and quantify this phenomenon. And we managed to quantify based on economic disgrowth. And the similar term has to do with investment, because investment has to do with trade. So we have the same, the same model. And now with the main index that we managed to calculate the economic impact of the Ukraine economy and the Russian economy and European economy is based on trade suffocation index, which is based on certain variables, as FDIs, the investments, exports, imports of the the economy, and we need to find what will be the damage, meaning the invasion, what kind of damage caused in the Russian economy and also in the Ukraine economy, but also in the European economy, because the sanctions that imposed to Russia affects dramatically European economy, because if this continues, since the monopoly natural gas that Europe supplies are only from Russia, there is a huge problem, and this will affect also European economies. And we find the findings are similar those that we find the paper wrote with Dr. Estrada about the United States and China war, because we saw that there is an economic interdependence between United States and China, and the same applies with Europe and Russia. Here we have a trade interdependence, and we see that there are two different patterns, but the results are the same. And I will mention first about the trade interdependence, that as we see that if we have these sanctions and we see the trade between Europe and and Russia, Russia will not harm as much as the European market, because the natural gas is a monopoly, where all the products, either agricultural programs or other, industrial programs that Russia can supply from Europe, they can find alternative ways. They can find, other countries that they can support that kinds of products. The same applies to United States and China. The United States mainly supports China with agricultural products, where Chinese, they support industrial and high-tech products, which means that now what happened with the United States and China during the Trump administration, the sanctions between and the tariff war between the two countries, Chinese managed to find a way to change the trend and replace the products that they got from the imports, the American imports, with imports from Australia, Canada, with UK and Argentina, where the United States cannot replace the products that China made with any other country, because this high-tech technology needs to be, developed and to be, established in a developed country, a country that has the means to support that kind of technology. And there are no alternatives for the United States or even Europe. And that's why I mentioned that Trump administration was right about the economy, because the economic interdependence that the United States has with China, in the future, we can see even now, they can force the United States to lose economic or even political independence. And that's what President Trump foresaw that this will happen. And another thing that President Trump did is to build this, trade relationship and business relationship with President Putin and Russia, because also he foresaw that what's going to happen is, if we don't bring Russia in the arms of Europe and United States, President Putin will choose to go to join China. And the main player and the main threat for us is China, it's not Russia. United States saw that, but it seems that Europeans didn't see that coming. Now, in this graph, we see the trade relations between the United States, Europe, and Russia, and see what will be the impact in terms of, of dollars. And we see that the trade between Russia and the United States is not so big, it's 27 billion, but compared to 292 billion that European Union has with Russia, it is substantial. Yes, indeed, Russia has 169 billion, trade with European Union. But as I said, most of the European, imports can be replaced with other countries, and countries, like China, India, or other, Latin American countries. Here we see the pipelines and the natural gas, as I mentioned, that Europe supply natural gas, unfortunately, only from Russia for now. And there are some decisions about, to find alternative ways of natural gas from Middle East, but still, for now, there's no any immediate solution. Because if something happens, even now, most of the European guys face, problems. But if the war continue in Ukraine between Russia, the next fall will be really hard for for the whole Europe. And now we see in this graph from George Marshall Institute, EU energy uses by type. And as you see, that the majority of energy that Europe uses is natural gas, which comes second, and first oil, which means that now that we have this conflict in Ukraine, the prices of oil went up, dramatically went up, and all of us suffered. But it seems that European Union the impact will be detrimental, because almost 60 to 65% of energy usage for European Union is based on oil and natural gas. So I don't want even to make any, I don't want to dare to make any estimation of what's going to happen in the next fall if this war, continues. This is a trade between Russia and Ukraine, the main exports, and you see what are the countries that based the trade, imports and exports, for Russia. It's interesting to know, to see, and probably to be able to make accurate or some kind of estimates what's going to happen in the Russian economy in the following, to the following months. And this is the Ukraine crisis, what's going to happen with wheat prices, something that we need, to pay attention, because Ukraine and Russian wheat production constitute 25% of the world's wheat production. Common sense says that the agriculture in Ukraine has stopped because of the invasion, which means next fall will be less than the price, the production of Ukraine, plus the production, or the Russian production will keep it for, inside, because of the sanctions. There's no way Russia to export their wheat, which means that the wheat will have less 25% of wheat production next fall. And this will be detrimental not only, for European countries, but I believe most of the countries that they will suffer are Middle East and African countries. So we don't. This will ignite a wave of inflation, which I already have because of oil prices and natural gas prices, that will move, to all other parts of the economy. But the wheat also will drive up at that time, the prices up to whatever, is wheat made. Now, this is the model, which shows based on trade stabilization index and this growth from the work function. This is in three dimension. And 3 dimension, it gives us the opportunity to show equilibria that cannot be depicted in Euclidean space, the 2-dimensional Euclidean space. And as we see, Y is agricultural exports, Y1 industrial and manufacturing sector, Y2 stands for the service sector, Y3 FDI flows mobility, and of course this is the time dimension, X side. And this is the Russia trade suffocation and EU trade suffocation index. And as we see how this will be affected, the trade and investment, this growth from the war. This now we see separately EU economy and Russian economy. And as we see that the European economy will be more affected. These are the scenarios for the economic impact of crisis, which these scenarios based on Bloomberg Economics are consistent with our findings. And as we see that they are, severe, moderate, and mild, scenarios. And as we see that the worst case scenarios, if the war continues, the prices, not only going up, but I believe we have a shortage of agriculture, food agriculture, worldwide. And even in the countries like the United States that may not have that kind of problem, the prices went up because the prices are determined by, derivative markets. And already, the derivative markets have already predicted what's going to happen in the future. The prices went up 15 to 20% already. And if, the war continues, we don't know what's going to happen next fall. And these are the possible scenarios which, if this conflict continues, let's say the worst case scenario is if Russia loses with, NATO invasion, then perhaps we may have, an escalated war. This is something that we don't need, to happen. What we need a win-win situation. A win-win situation is that the Russians has to withdraw the troops from Ukraine at first. The second is that, unfortunately, but this is a game that a card that NATO has to play. They need to stop and agree that none of the ex-Soviet states plus the Nordic countries will enter NATO. In order Russia to feel safe that nothing will happen in the future. And this probably is the card that can give Ukrainian political independence, because also Russia wants to intervene and become a major player in political, Ukraine environment, which of course is wrong, because then there's no, if there's no political independence, there's no, country independence. And of course, the rest of the issues are between Ukraine and Russia, and they need to find a way how to solve these issues based on what will be feasible and reasonable at that particular moment. Now, if Russia prevails, unfortunately, we have a downgrade of United States and Europe in geopolitical status. Why? Because what is doing right now Russia is wants to show to China or to Asians or even to Gulf countries, Arab worlds, that I can play the game. I am the major player, and if Russia wins, it will turn the table, meaning that the role of NATO or role of Europe will not be important anymore to Asians and especially to China. And that's why it is really important how this invasion will take place, because if Russia manages to prevail, it shows to China that because China wants to expand, and one of the things that China needs is to take over Taiwan. Unfortunately for them, but fortunately for us, United States foresaw this coming, and that's why they said, the American fleet and managed to stop that, because the Chinese were ready to invade, Taiwan. Of course, yuan and ruble will gain power against the US dollar and euro. What I'm afraid that the same Russia asked about the exports to be paid, in rubles. I believe that China will ask to do the same, that all, Chinese exports to be paid in yuan. And I'm afraid that perhaps the Gulf countries will, if, follow, that they will ask, to get paid in yuan or ruble, then it will be, the end of, US dollar. And if this happens, then we have military conflicts, as I said, in Taiwan, in Japan, the Philippines, all of these areas that China wants to intervene, South Korea with North Korea, Israel from the Arab states, and even we have conflict between Greece and Turkey, because Turkey now is part, maybe they keep a neutral position, but at the same time they try to see, like China, who's going to win, in this game, in order to see whether we'll, follow Americans, or Russians. So this can happen. Why? Because if Russia manages to win this game, it means that NATO doesn't have the power to intervene if two other, other conflicts around the globe take place. And that's why we need to be careful. But even if we move to a win-win situation, it doesn't mean that this will stop. The rise of BRICS cannot stop. What we can give, to Europe and United States is to buy time. Why? Because something that mentioned, in a Trump paper is that China, they are planning to change their, economic model. They want their economy not to base to the exports anymore, but to be autarkic, meaning to be self-sustained. And how this happen? In order to have a self-sustained economy, you need your middle class to be self-sustained and be able to support your economy. The middle class, Chinese middle class in 2000 was only 30 million people. Now, by the end of 2022, it's estimated will be 700 million people, which means is the middle class of the whole Europe and North America together. And it's estimated by 2027 that the middle class, the Chinese middle class, will reach 1.2 billion people. And why this is important to us? Because if the Chinese middle class reach 1.2 billion people and the China doesn't want to adjust their production and they want to keep the same production capacity, it means that they reverse the loss of trade. It means that they will keep the production to satisfy the domestic and the local, demand, and whatever is left, they will leave, they send it to Europe or United States. What does it mean? If this happens, it means that the prices, we estimated in this, paper that the prices, production prices will go up 30% into 2027 in the Chinese market. But this price, with conservative estimates, of course, but these prices will go up to 50% in European markets or in American markets. In other words, what they were afraid, the Europeans or Americans, that the price will go up when President Trump said that we need to bring the production back. That's what he wanted to mention, that the cost of production will go up anyway. So it's a matter of time to realize when you have to do it, when you have the time, because it's not easy to bring the high-tech production back, because you need to bring it to certain countries. And this is not easy. And if you decide to do that in 2027, it's too late. Because if you want to do the higher production to bring back even in Europe and United States, probably will take 3-5 years. And this 3-5 years gap, China or even Russia will be head ahead in terms of technology. The production has to bring back now. Gradually has to bring back now. And this is something is inevitable. But why? Because we allow Chinese to monopolize production. What do you expect to happen? Okay. And this is it, and thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Evangelos. Great presentation. We learned so much from you. And I think we have so much to learn from this war. I think a new geopolitical situation. Now the question is, who is going to take the leadership correctly? In the sense that we cannot put everything in one hand. I feel like in these next 10 years, we're going to see so many changes politically, socially, technologically. And this is, now the question is how developing countries and less developing countries in Latin America can handle to adapt to these new changes. Now in Latin America, we have a scarcity of fertilizers, also many products from Russia and Ukraine, especially we have a lot of relation in the sense of agriculture products with Russia and Ukraine, on both sides. Africa also, and I think we need to generate a new model in the sense that countries need to be more independent or less dependent from overseas agriculture products. We need to have national food security or regional food security minimum.
That's why, as we see, the world is divided. I thought that it will be divided based on continents, but it seems that we have an intercontinental, continent coalition.
Yes.
So based on this model, we will have, I think, two worlds, because this is inevitable. You cannot do much.
Yeah.
Because look, if you see the way that BRICS have, developed, we have the military power and know-how, the military know-how of Russia, natural resources of Russia, but
Yes,
we have
natural resources.
Exactly. And we have also the economic model of China, because China has the power to support a new economic system.
Yeah.
But this new economic system cannot be supported solely by the Chinese middle class. And what we have? Indian middle class.
Yeah.
Indian middle class. Why? Because India and China together, they can support the model. They don't need anyone else. But the weakness of these two countries is agriculture. Meaning, if we manage to stop Argentina to join BRICS, this is a game changer. Because the China did the same mistake like Japan.
Yes, you are right.
As I mentioned to you many times, because it is, as a joke, is easier and cheaper to buy a Toyota in Japan rather to buy a pineapple.
Yeah, you're right.
What I want also, it's a game changer also to Europe. European countries, Southern European countries have to realize that the agriculture now is a game changer.
Yeah, it's true.
And they can change the rules of trade with Northern European countries, because you can go and tell, to the German, Belgium, or Denmark, or Danish, or Swedish, look, you cannot eat Mercedes, you cannot eat Porsche, you cannot eat technology.
Yes.
You need food. That is the concept, inception of BRICS between Russia and China, because the game changing now is natural resources. It's not a digital technology. To tell, to bring everything to digital and to transform, that we don't need, natural, paper money anymore.
Yes.
Even if we have a digital currency, this will go up, sky high, inflation. Why? Because everything will be based on what you produce.
Yeah, it's true.
So we have a perpetual Phillips curve that will go up and up. And I don't want to end up what happened with Germany after the First World War, when after the First World War the inflation was so sky high that you need 1 billion, I think, marks in order to buy a loaf of bread.
Yes.
The same thing will be with digital currency. Because if you don't have natural resources and they are very limited, it doesn't matter how much money you have, even in terms of gold. Why? And you move, to a digital currency. Yes, but then this will go up. Even if you try to manipulate, inflation, you cannot manipulate inflation, because whatever you need to buy is not only, software, let's say, based products. It's also products that are made, like cars, like furnitures, houses, agriculture products. Because even if the agriculture, we still have a mass production, because scarcity of natural resources, it means that everything will be reversed. And as you see that we have the first negative interest rates, and no one mentioned why we have negative interest rates in governmental bonds, and also in Switzerland. Because what it means, negative interest rate, it means that the present will be worse, the past, the future will be worse than the present.
Yes.
That the present money are more valuable than the money in the future. No one says that. Everybody says, it's a trick or whatever. No, it's based on natural resources, because lack of natural resources means negative interest rate. Forget mass production. Everything will go to a boutique production and diversification. And also the price, the salaries will go down. Will not be able, the prices of products will go up, because you don't have mass production, you have to produce less, so the prices will go up, which means that what the economists predicted 10 years ago, that this generation that are the millennials probably will be the first generation that they will make less money than their parents. That's what it means.
I understand. Okay, Dr. Evangelos, thank you so much for this great presentation. On behalf of the Center for Latin American Studies from University of Malaya, we appreciate your knowledge, your comments, and then we learn a lot. today. And I expect
Thank you
to
so
see
much for having me, Dr. Mario. Again, say hello to my friends Malaysians and my University of Malaya. And
Thank
I
you.
hope, to meet again.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay.
I'm
Have a
cutting
nice
down.
day.
Thank you. You too. Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.
Thank you.